Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. 4 years ago, I uploaded a video essay titled I'm Not Like the Other Girls. This video ended up becoming one of the most popular on my channel. I cannot believe that this was only 4 years ago. It feels like a lifetime ago. It's not my best. You can check it out if you want, but don't say that you haven't been warned. But in this video 4 years ago, I discussed I'm not like the other girls discourse and being a pick-me and internalized misogyny. I discussed a lot of my own experiences as a reformed pick-me. I've also spoken about this again on my friend Sophie Butler's podcast if you want to check that out. But after recording that podcast episode, I realized that there's been a lot of progression in pick-me politics since I filmed my original video essay. So much so that I wanted to make a retrospective 4 years later. The pick-me girl has become a little bit of a boogie monster. You very rarely come across a pick-me in the traditional sense nowadays. It's no longer socially acceptable nor cool to dunk on other women for male validation. The only pick-me's that really exist are female conservative influencers, but rage bait pick-meism is something we're going to discuss in this video. But something which has been playing on my mind a lot is how do these pseudo-feminist internet terms and slang like pick-me or its most modern rendition, not a girl's girl, every single time these terms which originated to highlight and denounce misogynistic behavior are then weaponized against women to further perpetuate misogyny. And this is a phenomenon I really didn't touch on in my original video because it was 4 years ago. I will say that this is probably a recent development of pick-me politics. I think a lot of the friction and conflict boils down to the shortcomings of social media feminism, which throughout this video I will now be referring to as digital feminism. This is a branch of feminism which has now been commodified. Social media is monetizable. Because of this, there are now ulterior motives to piling on celebrities and chiming in on trending topics. And I also think a lot of the complications of digital feminism are rooted in the short form content economy, which inherently lacks nuance, the danger of algorithms, and how far and quickly information can spread. There's a lot of moving parts here. As you guys can tell, I'm really excited to get into today's video, so let's get into it. I'm going to keep the evolution of the pick-me short and sweet because been there, done that, got the t-shirt. But pick-me was the noun born from the I'm not like the other girls phenomenon, a social media trend where teen and tween girls denounced feminine interests and wore I'm not like the other girls as a badge of honor. I know we look back on this entire debacle with amusement. I mean, come on, it is all a little bit daft, but I think something which is important to note is that I'm not like the other girls was a form of reclamation. Young girls who grew up not quite fitting the gender binaries that was expected of them, wearing feminine clothing, having feminine interests and hobbies, were often told by the adults in their life that they weren't like the other girls, with tones of concern or sadness and yearning for a more feminine daughter. All these girls were excluded by other girls that they went to school with for being weird. In essence, these girls were othered, and I'm not like the other girls was a defense and a proud reclamation for not being a stereotypical girl. I'm not like the other girls, and I'm proud of it. I think it's really important to remember that when we look back on this behavior with amusement, that this behavior was born from these girls being subjected to misogyny at a really young age and trying to escape that. And this is something which I didn't touch on in my original video at all, which to be honest, I think it's because I didn't really know. The pick-me came very shortly after I'm not like the other girls. Like most social media slang, it's derived from AAVE and was popularized on Twitter with the hashtag tweet like a pick-me. And further, this phrase originated from this very infamous Grey's Anatomy scene.
So pick me. Choose me. Love me.
It's important to note that pick-me has always had negative connotations, and when it originated, it did have good intentions. This was an insult in response to internalized misogyny. Insulting women no longer flies anymore, folks, and it became a trend to mock pick-me's and women who perpetuated misogyny with hashtag tweet like a pick-me. But I do think there is a distinction between I'm not like the other girls and a pick-me. Pick-me's were perpetuating misogyny for the sole purpose of male validation, hence pick me, choose me, love me. They wanted to be in the group of boys pointing and laughing at women, and they wanted to be pointing and laughing too. I think because the term pick me is thrown around so liberally these days, obviously it's lost all of its meaning, but I think that people tend to forget that pick me was political. It was feminist action in a way. It was a manifestation of digital feminism, which is a subject we are going to sort of slowly unravel as this video goes on. But I think something which is definitely worth unpacking is that only a label for misogynistic women took off in this way. Pick me has really become a cultural phenomenon. Ask anyone under the age of 35 what a pick me is and they will be able to define it. We are going to discuss misogynistic women more as this video goes on. I do think the reason why women judge misogynistic women more than misogynistic men is for the obvious. There is an element of betrayal. From men, we expect them to be misogynistic, but from women, not only to go through life as a woman and still perpetuate misogyny, but in a way, it feels like you're taking the man's side. It feels like the ultimate betrayal. And also, for a lack of a better term, it's just absolutely baffling. And extreme content performs more highly on social media because people are shocked into engagement. And seeing a woman perpetuate misogyny is far more shocking than seeing a man do it. We know how this story ends. Pick me, once used to denounce misogynistic women, is now used to further perpetuate misogyny. What a shock. What a shock, folks. Again, we'll be discussing this more later, don't you worry. 10 years ago, the term was used to call out misogynistic women, but it's also worth noting the amount of men who use the term pick me as vehicles for their own misogyny. Because I highly doubt that all of the men using hashtag tweet like a pick me are just really passionate about women's rights. They were using it to mock women. And this is a shortcoming I've noticed within sort of the social justice meme space. I do think that a lot of men forget that they are actually punching down. Let me elaborate. Terms like Karen and jokes about white women were initially used to call out racist behavior or poke jokes at white people, which is fine, similarly to how women make derogatory jokes about men. But why have white men started making white women jokes? I beg your pardon. And there is no social commentary present. It's just white women are so annoying. Am I right, guys? Like, baby, you're also white, and multiple white male TikTok comedians have been called out for perpetuating misogyny via white women jokes, and something very similar happened with the term Karen. This term was initially used to call out white women who weaponize their tears and perceived vulnerability to perpetuate racism, sometimes even violent racism. And similarly to pick me, once this term was chewed up and spat out by the social media machine, now it's just used to label any annoying white woman. And if we just circle back to pick me's, there is something that feels very icky about men who mock women who are pick-me's. Because pick-me's, although they are perpetuating misogyny, they are simply responding and conforming to our current patriarchal system. A system which these men may not have built themselves, but they definitely help uphold it and benefit from it. Although pick-me is still a very popular term, it's still very present within the social media lexicon, it's lost a lot of its original meaning. And again, we will discuss this later in the video, don't you worry, sit tight. But this means naturally we need a new age digital feminist term to uplift women and combat misogyny, which we will inevitably use to hammer women into submission if they aren't behaving in ways that we like or are palatable to our very unnuanced black and white perception of the human existence. But firstly, let's talk about rage baiting. A notion I have repeated in this video is that there aren't any real pick-me's anymore. Being a pick-me was very of the times, it was very 2010, and because of the social media revolt against pick-me's, it became uncool. So it's very rare to find a pick-me in the traditional sense, unless they're a conservative influencer. Yes, I'm going to talk about just pearly things. Pearl Davis is a 28-year-old conservative influencer whose entire bread and butter is being vocally anti-feminist. Some Pearl Davis zingers include saying that women like to be cheated on. She tweeted that 16-year-olds are hotter than 26-year-olds, but she did then contradict herself by claiming that women are the hottest in their 20s. She argued that in most abusive relationships, the man and the woman are abusing each other. As you guys can probably imagine, I could go on for longer, but for the sake of my mental health, I'm gonna put a stop to this. Pearl Davis has been named the pick-me final boss. People assume that to spew such misogynistic drivel, it must be for male validation, surely. And maybe this is all for the attention of men. I don't know Pearl, I'm not in her head, thank God. But to me, it seems that above all, Pearl is a rage baiter. She perpetuates violent misogyny to grow her platform and make money. And this is where I begin to feel really conflicted about discussing Pearl and her rage baiting tactics. Just Just pearly things has easily been one of the most requested subjects on my channel, and I've been avoiding doing this until now because by denouncing her content in a way I am platforming her to over 500,000 people. I still don't know how to feel about it, but when discussing pick-me politics, I can't not talk about pick-me rage baiters and conservative women. But before we get into that, I do just want to make another side note as to why I've avoided talking about Pearl for so long. Aside from the murky ethics of engaging with rage baiters, I find Pearl discourse infuriating because I see so many people on the left tend to perpetuate the misogyny which they are claiming to denounce, all within the same sentence, often within the same tweet. And what I mean by that is that people will often weaponize Pearl's appearance against her almost as a gotcha moment. And I understand where this comes from. Pearl regularly insults women for their appearance, for their weight, in really disgusting and degrading ways. And often when people are insulting Pearl's appearance, they're pointing out the hypocrisy of insulting someone on the basis that they don't conform to conventional beauty standards, when Pearl herself doesn't conform to the conventional beauty standards that she herself perpetuates. I understand where people are coming from, I really do, but my whole spiel is I don't think we should fight fire with fire. And tweeting about how ugly Pearl is, or tweeting a picture of you looking hot next to a picture of Pearl, isn't the feminist slam dunk moment you think it is. It almost reminds me of when someone tweets that X female celebrity isn't hot, and then a man will come on and say, yes she is, I jerk off to her every night, and the tweet gets like 60,000 likes. And I want to make it very clear that I understand where people are coming from when they insult Pearl's appearance. It's going to sound extremely childish, but she started it, and Pearl's takes where she stamps all over really sensitive subjects like domestic violence are going to invoke feelings of rage. It's also baffling because it seems that Pearl isn't self-aware, even though I'm here to argue that she very much is. And I am not against pointing out Pearl's hypocrisy. She is someone who bangs on about how a woman's innate role is to homemake and get married and raise children, but she's nearly 30, single, and is very outspoken and is very much employed. Oftentimes it seems the person that she is hurting the most with her twisted ideology is herself, but of course my empathy is close to zero for Pearl because she is doing this on purpose to make money. She does not care. But just calling Pearl ugly and perpetuating misogyny back at her, I don't think is the best way to go about this matter. Maybe we should deconstruct and disprove her arguments and correct misinformation which she spreads on her extremely large platform. Or the more difficult question to answer is, should we be engaging with her at all? This is an incredibly difficult question to answer because on one hand, social media is a very dangerous tool for radicalization. Mostly young boys with internet access and monitored by their parents will be radicalized by misogynistic and far-right influencers, and they are fed more and more of this content via algorithms. And this has grave and fatal consequences. There are so many girls and women who should be living their lives right now. They should be graduating from university. They should be spending time with friends and family. They should be getting married, starting families, but their lives were cut short by violent men who were radicalized by algorithms. On one hand, if rage baiting is gaining traction, Pearl has a really large platform. We do have a responsibility to correct misinformation, but even by correcting misinformation, even me discussing Pearl right now is platforming her. I will say that I'm definitely not against calling out misinformation from rage baiters if this misinformation is gaining some real traction. What does get under my skin a little bit, and something I'm not sure I agree with, is I think the waters tend to get a little murky when we begin inviting rage baiters onto platforms which are larger than their own. Yes, I'm talking about podcasts. Yes, I'm talking about debates. I do think there is a real positive outcome to essentially dunking on anti-feminist influencers and rage baiters. I can't remember what YouTuber highlighted this, but someone pointed out that Bomber Guy making these videos where he mocked far-right, alt-right content creators and YouTubers was a real turning point for the alt-right and the pendulum swinging the other way because they were being mocked. And I think people connect with someone mocking someone more than someone correcting someone. Essentially, I think that slam dunking on anti-feminist influencers being seen as cool is a positive. Sometimes mocking someone is the most effective way of denouncing them in this very fast-paced short-form content economy. But do I think that the positives derived from this outweigh the negatives of platforming bigots to millions of people? Probably not. I think some of my conflicted feelings come into play when people are profiting from this platforming. And look, maybe I'm a hypocrite because I'm profiting from this video right now and I'm technically platforming Pearl. But I'm talking more about very explicit platforming, like podcast episodes, like debates. And again, I love this term, but something feels a little bit icky about platforming violent misogynistic rhetoric and profiting from it. I feel like I'm going a little bit off kilter here. Like, I know this is going to be like wackadoodle time, but I can't help but feel like this is a slightly egotistical endeavor. Are these podcasters and influencers really passionate about feminism and the plight of women's struggles, or do they just want an ego boost from winning a debate? A debate which is very easily won, by the way, because Pearl's arguments have extremely shaky foundations. I just think it's worth questioning these people's intentions, whether they just talk about feminist issues in the same breath as a debate or an argument, or share feminist arguments for the sole purpose of slam dunking on Pearl, knowing it will make a good TikTok. Again, engaging with rage baiters is something that I still feel very conflicted about. There are many valid arguments against engaging with rage baiters. To quote Crystal Andrews for zfeed.com, I'm begging you to stop stitching racists, TERFs, and misogynists just to prove them wrong. Whitney Phillips is a media studies scholar who wrote the definitive report on how online misinformation spreads, called The Oxygen of Amplification. It explains how hate groups, conspiracy theories, and internet trolls successfully manipulated the media between 2016 and 2018. Essentially, by convincing journalists to cover them, these antagonists got exactly what they wanted: a bigger audience to hear their ideas. Phillips pointed that even when a story was critical of these people, the simple act of covering makes bad actors more visible and influential than they would have been otherwise, which is always a net benefit to them. The report was written in a pre-TikTok world, but now stitching on the app works in the exact same way. Even the most based call out still benefits the troll or agitator. I'm sure you guys feel the same way that I do. I don't know what the best way forward is when it comes to engaging with rage baiters. My current positioning and standing is to correct misinformation which is spreading without directly engaging, screen record, scribble out their username. I think we should stop inviting rage baiters onto podcasts for debates. Enough of that, please. But of course, my opinion could change on this. I think a lot about Louis Theroux's documentaries. He covers some of the darkest place in the world, the most bigoted people in society. And I wouldn't say he's platforming those people. He's doing the job of a journalist. He's asking the right questions and being critical. And one thing about Louis Theroux is that he never softballs, but maybe different rules apply to social media, especially when the people who are platforming these rage-baiting bigots aren't journalists and they have just as much to profit from this as Pearl does. I don't know. As you guys can tell, I haven't got an answer for this one, but something I do know is labeling Pearl as a pick-me, as doing what she does for the sole purpose of male validation, I think is really reductive. And I actually think that it takes away from recognizing that this content is rage-baiting and that this content exists solely to make money. And again, perhaps this is because pick me is a pop culture term, it's begun to lose a lot of meaning, it's internet slang, but I feel like labeling Pearl just as a pick me is really reductive. And I think there's far more moving parts at play than just Pearl gagging for a little bit of male attention. She's doing all of this to turn a profit because there is a lot of money to be made by being a right-wing grifter or influencer. I watched a video on the David Pakman show, Why is Right-Wing Grifting So Much More Lucrative? In this video, David argues that not only is the story, the narrative of a reformed lefty to a Trump-voting, gun-wielding, anti-abortion right-winger more idolized by the right, and it just really isn't the same on the left, but also there's a lot more money to pay right-wing grifters. The right simply has more money to pay influencers than the left. And I'm sure this isn't a shock to any of you guys. This certainly wasn't a shock to me. But whilst I was researching, I found this story where the US Justice Department alleged that 2 employees of RT, a Russian state broadcaster, have funneled $10 million to a US media company that hired prominent right-wing influencers in an attempt to sway the election. And that's just one example of someone who may have allegedly been caught. I cannot even begin to imagine the amount of right-wing influencers that have done undisclosed ads for politicians or companies because the influencer industry in the US is so unregulated. But if we just circle back to pick-me's, the pick-me of it all, I find the usage of the term pick me absolutely fascinating because on one hand it is used incredibly liberally. You can be a woman that's being a little bit annoying and you'll be slapped with the label of pick me. But on the other hand, pick me is used to describe far-right conservative female influencers who perpetuate violent misogyny. It's almost become an umbrella term over the years. Honestly, I think either usage is bad, but I think using the term pick me to describe conservative female influencers, it feels reductive and it feels like honestly like it's dumbing it down. And I think the term pick me barely scratches the surface of what we're dealing with here when it comes to conservative women. And again, I think this relates to a common theme which is going to be cropping up throughout this video, which is the shortcomings of digital feminism. In the short form content economy we now all function in, this economy requires compartmentalization, making things as compact and short and snappy as possible. This is why hashtag tweet like a pick me was trending and not hashtag tweet like a woman who perpetuates misogyny as a way of escaping misogyny herself. But in turn, we are compartmentalizing really hefty issues and in my opinion doing a complete disservice to them. I think maybe we aren't engaging with them as deeply as we should and we're just dismissing them as pick me behavior when really there is so much more to dig our teeth into. I just wanted to discuss rage baiting pick me's in this video, but if you want to know more about conservative women, there are multiple video essays on Shanspere's channel which I'll leave down below. I highly recommend them. We've discussed pick me's on the extreme end of things, but let's take it back and let's discuss the everyday pick me. I'm sure we are all familiar with the current state of pick-me discourse. Nowadays, it seems that a term which was once used to denounce misogyny now just perpetuates it. Any woman which is perceived to be acting in a certain way for male validation will be slapped with the label of pick-me with haste. And as you guys can probably imagine, the problems very quickly begin to bubble to the surface because what does it take for a woman to be perceived as doing something for male validation? Well, not much. My friend Tara Mooney made a brilliant video about the pick me paradox. I'll leave that link down below. But funnily enough, it seems that anytime a woman displays any kind of masculine interest, maybe she has more male friends than female friends, they are labeled a pick me, which all seems a little bit misogynistic. To denigrate a woman who doesn't have feminine interests or subverts gender expectations in some kind of way. But Tara already spoke about this in her video, so I want to touch on something a little different. Being slammed as a pick-me is not just reserved for women who love the footy or have more male friends than female friends. You can be labeled a pick-me for just being annoying. And this is what I wanted to dig my teeth into. Is she just a pick-me or is she just a bit annoying? And I wanted to further explore the gendered politics of annoying. And this isn't just a problem exclusive to the way that men perceive women, because I cannot help but feel that who we perceive as annoying is gendered. And this isn't just reserved for men. Women perpetuate this type of misogyny too, but this is a phenomenon which we'll circle back to later. And I don't think anything displays this phenomenon more perfectly than misogynistic internet witch hunts. It's a shame because I couldn't find a ton of resources as to why women are consistently perceived and labeled as annoying. If anybody has the time or the resources to dedicate to a study on the gendered politics of annoying, that would be amazing. Send it my way. Because this is an insult which is levied against women far more than men. Growing up as a girl who was outgoing and very loud, I was constantly labeled as annoying. Meanwhile, boys who would display similar behavior to me were labeled as class clowns. Imagine after all of this, annoying isn't gendered at all and I was just annoying. Like, I just outed myself here, but you guys know what I'm saying. And this is just anecdotal, but just to list off a few studies in the way that men and women's behavior are perceived differently. Research by Textillo on workplace bias found that women are negatively stereotyped at work up to 7 times more often than men. These negative stereotypes include emotional, unlikable, and difficult. A study conducted by Stanford linguist Catherine Hilton found that there is a gender gap in what is considered an interruption. Male listeners are more likely to view women who interrupted another speaker in the audio clips as ruder, less friendly, and less intelligent than men who interrupted. And research conducted by Harvard Business Review found that using humor at work actually harms women but benefits men. We find that when men add humor to a business presentation, observers view them as having higher levels of status, that is, respect or prestige, within the organization, and give them higher performance ratings and leadership capability assessments compared to when they do not include humor. However, when women add the same humor to the same presentation, people view them as having lower levels of status, rate their performance as lower, and consider them less capable leaders. And this is what I want to hone in on. I'm not saying that we can't find women annoying or that we aren't allowed to dislike another woman, but rather, would you perceive this behavior differently if it was coming from a man? But more importantly, why is being annoying perceived as an issue of morality when it's a woman, as a sign of bad character? I'm specifically referring to these misogynistic internet witch hunts where one party accuses a woman of X behavior and people will reference times that this woman has been annoying or rude as a sign of definitive guilt. And this is a phenomenon which just doesn't happen to men as often. A girl's girl is the pick-me antithesis. She is a woman who supports other women. Now, despite a girl's girl and a pick-me being direct opposites each other, they are both used to perpetuate misogyny. What a shock. Funnily enough, when we hear the term girl's girl, it's very often with the word not in front of it. She's not a girl's girl. It's funny that this phrase, which was intended to celebrate and uplift women, is far more often used to disparage women who are not supportive enough of women or are not fitting the standard of what we think a good woman is. I know I'm going to be ruffling some feathers with this segment of this video, and I want you guys to know that you are all completely in your right to disagree with me, but all I ask is that you listen and you take in everything I'm saying and then you can disagree with me. But before we get into all of that, I firstly want to explore why the term girl's girl came about when it did, rose to popularity, and seemingly resonated with so many women, because the first important thing to note is that not a girl's girl differs from pick me because it is being used by majority women. Meanwhile, pick me seems to be used equally by both men and women. The girl's girl was born from, again, a lack of a better term, the 2023 girl power wave. With the release of Barbie came a tidal wave of pro-women, pro-feminism, pro-feminine, pro-female friendship sentiment, and that's what I want to hone in on, the female friendship of it all. Female friendship had and is still having such a moment on social media, specifically through trending TikTok audios from Sex and the City, Gilmore Girls, Friends, Derry Girls, and most notably Dolly Alderton's memoir, Everything I Know About Love. Everything I know about love, I've learned from my long-term friendships with women. Girl power and female friendships really had a moment, and they still are having a moment. I think with the rise of platforms like TikTok, which have such a high exposure algorithm, I think a lot of women began having more open conversations about the ways that men have wronged them, the ways men have hurt them, the state of modern day dating, and in turn have really began to embrace and appreciate the female friendship in their lives. And obviously, I think this is beautiful. And this environment fostered the term girl's girl. As I mentioned earlier, people do use the term girl's girl as a compliment, but far more often than not, it's used in a derogatory manner. She's not a girl's girl. And it seems at the moment that the term not a girl's girl is used more often than pick me. And I think the reason for this is because not a girl's girl packs far more punch than pick me. Again, as I've mentioned throughout this video, because the term pick me has been used so often, it's so oversaturated, it's lost a lot of meaning. But being told you're not a girl's girl is very direct. Not a lot can get lost in translation there. And now, don't get me wrong, the most daft of actions can leave you labeled as not a girl's girl. Girl's girl discourse has fallen down a very similar pipeline as pick me discourse. But before we get into that, not a girl's girl was originally used to label women who had wronged a woman in some way, often for male validation or a man. The ultimate not a girl's girl case study being Ariana Grande. I'm sure you guys all know about the Ariana Grande rigmarole, but just a quick Spark Notes version to freshen up our memories. Ariana Grande and her now boyfriend Ethan Slater met on the set of Wicked. They were both married and Ethan Slater had just had a baby. Both parties claimed no infidelity occurred, but either way, Ethan Slater left his wife Lily J, who had just had a baby, to be with Ariana Grande. Allegedly, Lily J spoke to Page Six and said that Ariana wasn't a girl's girl and that her family was just collateral damage. What I will say is that I do not trust tabloids one bit, but the one time that Lily J has gone on the record and discussed her divorce was an essay that she wrote for The Cut, which I'd actually really recommend reading. She spoke about how this scandal and being launched in the limelight really impacted her career as a therapist, because a therapist is sort of supposed to be inherently anonymous. I'd highly recommend reading it. I'll leave it linked down below. But I think the reason why girls discourse is particularly tricky is because sometimes we are discussing women who have done or have allegedly done bad things to other women. Often we are discussing women who have cheated, women who have knowingly had affairs with married men, or have dated with their friends or best friends, ex-boyfriends. We are dealing with very murky, morally, ethically dubious territory here, which digital feminism simply doesn't have the capacity to handle. TikTok is the place where nuance goes to die. Would we maybe argue that people are weaponizing feminist rhetoric and argument? Are people in their right to weaponize feminist rhetoric and argument if the woman they're weaponizing it against has done wrong to another woman? Is dogpiling someone ever fair if you believe that they're in the wrong? Can you understand how this gets real murky real fast? And I'm going to take a little side note for a second, because I have been asked so much about what I think of the Ariana Grande and Ethan Slater situation, and I've avoided covering it because I think it's such a hot button topic. I am not going to sit here and say who I think is in the right or who I think is in the wrong, because at the end of the day, these are people who I do not know. But I think what has really grabbed my attention with this entire situation is that this is a private matter which unfolded publicly, and millions of people are chiming in who have absolutely zero stakes in the situation. Social media is very black and white, meanwhile real life is very grey. I know people, and I'm friends with people who have cheated, who have left their partners for someone else. I know people who have gotten with their friends' exes or their exes' friends. And when these situations happen in your life or in your friendship group, there is that initial blow up. People take sides, the parties who are in the wrong are reprimanded for their actions. It is the talk for months. But eventually everything calms down and people are either forgiven or not forgiven, but regardless, everybody moves on. And when these matters unfold publicly on social media, people never move on. And often the people who don't move on have no involvement in the situation. They're just onlookers. Not only do I think that people exploit these morally dubious situations to unleash sadism and abuse on public figures, but these situations end up following celebrities around for the rest of their lives. And this is something which concerns me, because I don't think we were supposed to live life in this way. And I think what's really interesting about when these matters unfold on social media is that there is no space for nuance, as I've mentioned throughout this video. Me and my housemate Jack, we've discussed this at length. But what makes this so interesting is you can have a nuanced conversation about Ariana Grande and Ethan Slater with the people in your life, with your friendship group, with even your family. But there just isn't that possibility on the internet. Either you sit on the side of completely reprimanding these people and their actions, or you'll be labeled as defending cheating. And this is just something which just doesn't happen in my real life amongst my friends when we have debates and conversations about subjects like this. I really think there is something to say about the phenomenon that is social justice bullying. As you guys can probably tell by the name, it's where people will bully an individual in the name of social justice. If we stay on the topic of Ariana Grande, sent her relentless abuse all in the name of feminism. And again, I'm not saying that public figures can't be critiqued. My entire channel is cultural criticism, for goodness sake. But it's worth questioning the intentions of people when the only time they speak on social justice issues is in the same breath of dunking on a celebrity or an influencer. Unfortunately, a lot of people exploit social justice issues and social justice language to flex their bullying muscles. And I spoke about this in my catfish video, but often straight cruelty goes completely unchecked if the victim is perceived as deserving of it. And on top of this, it's even more complex to call out this behavior when the victim isn't a perfect victim. And it's not like I think everyone who is critical of Ariana Grande is just trying to burn some steam and send abuse her way, but I do think a fair few people fall under that umbrella. But circling back, these issues can be really difficult to discuss because, people are emotionally invested, and I completely understand why. These situations tend to draw very emotional reactions from people because we all know what it's like to be cheated or to be broken up with out of the blue or to have another woman betray us. But I really hope that on this channel, at least, I have fostered an environment where we can have a nuanced conversation about this and me not be labeled as someone who's defending cheating. And also another point I wanted to make, but I didn't really know where to throw it in, so I'm just going to shoehorn it in here, is that social media is completely monetizable. There's a lot of money to be made, but not just this. We all get endorphin rushes from likes and follows and comments and engagement and interactions, meaning there is a very alluring incentive to jump on these hate trains. But as I mentioned earlier, Girls Girl has fallen down the same dreaded pipeline as Pick Me. It now perpetuates the misogyny that it claimed to denounce. Now, the most mundane of actions can have you accused of not being a Girls Girl. Have very few female friends? Not a Girls Girl. Are you an actress who gave one of your female colleagues a side eye? Not a Girls Girl. Did you stare at someone filming a TikTok publicly in the street? Not a Girls Girl. You can see where I'm going with this. I think what makes girls girl misogyny more concerning than pick me misogyny is that it is perpetuated by mostly women. And I wanted to explore this further as to why it seems that women are particularly susceptible to internalized misogyny, to the point where internalized misogyny crops up in our culture over and over and over and over again. As I've spoken about earlier, women are socialized within patriarchy, so it's inevitable that we are going to internalize the misogyny that we are surrounded with. I read an article on Psychology Today, Women Who Hate Other Women, the psychological root of snarky, which cites some potential reasons as to why women's harshest critics are other women, such as having an overly critical mother or inadequacy anxiety. But during mine and Leanne's research, I ended up stumbling across a really interesting study, which I think is a significant piece of this puzzle. Into Female Hostility, Attractiveness and Femininity versus Likeability by Savannah Henshaw, Lydia Estes, and Lauren Olson. In this study, which was conducted in 2018, the researchers are referencing female hostility within the workplace, but they also reference politics as well. When we discuss misogyny across the board, we immediately think of men who are perpetuating it, and that men need to make changes, which true. But research suggests that women play a significant role in maintaining the gender gap within the workplace due to inter-female hostility. The researchers explain this as the comparison mentality women have when they feel threatened by someone else. An example of the comparison mentality is, oh, she is pretty, I am not. She is smart, I am not. To directly quote the study, by comparing themselves to each other in this way, women inadvertently foster a mindset of competition that destroys relationships among them. And this study takes this idea further and suggests that the more attractive a woman is, the more negatively she is perceived by other women. And it's actually really funny discussing this because this almost goes against everything that I argue on this channel. The less conventionally attractive someone is, the harsher their actions are perceived and the more negatively they are perceived by other people. And this still holds true. In this study, they even cite how attractive politicians essentially get away with more unethical behavior than unattractive politicians. But perhaps this phenomenon is ever so slightly flipped when it is inter-female, when it's women on women. To quote the study again, for decades, research has shown that women are more hostile to each other than men. From an early age, women begin demonstrating aggression and hostility almost exclusively to their female peers. Women judge more attractive women to be less trustworthy. They threaten the resources and opportunities by their peers and create a lack of trust in other women. As a result, women are much harsher critics of their female colleagues and in many cases endorse gender stereotypes more enthusiastically than their male counterparts. The comparison and competition among women encourages them to succeed by elevating themselves above other women in the workplace and perpetuating gender inequalities among their inferiors. The candidate was statistically less likable when she was wearing makeup, meaning there is a significant relationship between attractiveness and likability. How this all relates to being a girl's girl and women who perpetuate misogyny is I don't want to imply that these women are just jealous, especially because women who aren't conventionally attractive aren't exactly getting an easy rap either. But I do think this environment of inter-female competition, which has been fostered for decades and we've been socialized within since birth, plays a significant role in why so many women are misogynistic. I've mentioned this throughout the video, but I think a great case study for this is misogynistic internet witch hunts and all of the recent smear campaigns against female celebrities. I do believe that women, because of the way we are socialized, we get an endorphin rush when we see a woman who we think is better than us, whether she's more attractive than us, dresses better than us, is smarter than us, is more successful than us. We get a little endorphin rush when we see them getting knocked down a peg. And smear campaigns against female celebrities is one significant example. But this all trickles down. We get a little endorphin rush when we see a woman who we are threatened by. Maybe we think she's prettier than us, cooler than us, get called not a girl's girl in a TikTok comment section because she has majority male friends, or because she committed the crime of side-eyeing a woman in a video. At the end of the day, the environment in which we are socialized in, it's no wonder that we will go on to perpetuate misogyny in our lives. Something I want you guys to take away from this video is I'm not trying to blame women for the way that we are raised and socialized, but also we are of that age now to stop this behavior. It may take an active effort. In a way, we are rewiring the way that our brains work. Misogyny is kind of the default if you think about it, but I do think that women who perpetuate misogyny, it is something that goes fairly unspoken, I feel like. I mean, I definitely haven't spoken about it all that much, because when we think about these large-scale misogynistic smear campaigns which take place on social media, far often they are being fronted by and driven by a lot of women. It makes my skin crawl. just to wrap this video up, because this has been a long one, I've been sat on the floor, my back hurts, my ass aches. Hopefully I've highlighted throughout this video that the inherent issues of pick-me politics, girl discourse, just pearly things, social justice bullying is the shortcomings of digital feminism. Social media is the place where nuance goes to die. We function in a very fast-paced, short-form content economy. Really hefty topics like internalized misogyny have to be compartmentalized into something short and snappy and trendy, into a meme like pick me. And even when these issues aren't necessarily transferred into memes, like being a girl's girl, because of the negative nature of social media, the fact that negativity gets higher engagement, you know, people say sex sells, but actually I think hating sells. And patriarchy, which both men and women are socialized in and function under, social media catchphrases and slang with initially positive intentions will seemingly always devolve into misogyny. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Oh, sorry, sweet relief, I finished filming. Guys, if you know any like YouTubers in your life, any YouTubers that do a lot of scripted stuff will say to you the least favorite part of their job is filming videos. And I always feel like high, like I'm on a high after I film a video because it's so like not strenuous, but you know what I mean? Like it's so just like, ugh. This is my first of my longer videos. As I've mentioned, we've been scaling it back a little bit so I can work on these videos for longer, produce some stuff that I'm really proud of. And also don't forget to follow me on Instagram and on TikTok for some more little short form video essays. But yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm so excited to read all of your comments, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you soon. Bye.